Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're going to take a look at a very cost-effective open-air test bench frame which you can purchase from Amazon.co.uk or Amazon US for somewhere in the region of about $30 plus a little bit of postage. I'll put some links in the video description. As always, they will be affiliated links, so we may earn a very small commission on any purchases made. Doesn't affect the price that you pay, but it does give a little kickback to us and it does go to help out the channel. So I should say as well, in the full disclosure, this was actually sent to me by Uglybob and also Aurali from our Discord, so thank you very much both of you, much appreciated. And it's actually something which I've been meaning to get my hands on for a very long time, just for some reason never got around to doing it. So what is a open air test bench? So as the name kind of suggests, it is essentially for building up a PC, for testing components, or maybe you just want to have a open air PC, set it up, use it as a tower and just use it as a regular PC, but without all the confines that you'd normally have with a full tower case. Now this will support ITX, micro ATX and ATX form factor boards. When it comes to eATX, I think you might struggle a little bit, but I'll put some dimensions on the screen a little bit later on in the video when we take a closer look at the components so you can see if yours potentially might fit. Although I would say realistically, I think it's going to be a bit of a tight fit, especially with the included fan bracket. So let's start off and look at the individual components before we put this thing together and assemble it. So the main thing, the main frame, is this rather solid metal which is powder coated in this nice satin matte black finish, which I quite like. And on the bottom you can see it has got curved edges, so it will raise the motherboard off the deck a little bit. And also you've got options for attaching screws and all the usual stuff as you'd expect. So yeah, pretty good start. Also included there is this fan bracket, so you can attach three 120mm fans on here. Potentially you can put radiators and things on there as well if you want to. It is very strong metal, so potentially that might be a thing. You can mount it either on the sides, such as this. Again, we'll go through the full installation a little bit later on. Also, if you're worried about actually having drives connected, most people these days are tending to go with NVMe drives, but if you're using old spinning rust or you've got a 2.5-inch SSD, then you've got this hard drive and SSD mounting bracket, so you can attach two SSDs, 2.5-inch, or you can attach a 3.5-inch drive, or potentially combinations thereof. We'll take a closer look at that later when we get it assembled. To hold on the power supply, there are two brackets. So this is the primary bracket. So this is going to be able to be used, your power supply, with either the fan facing in towards the motherboard or facing away. Again, depending on your situation. If you're going to be using this as a PC in the kind of vertical mode, then you're going to want to have the fan facing up, because otherwise the fan is going to be facing down. It's going to be essentially on the deck, so not getting any airflow. So again, we'll take a look at that as we get it assembled. The other part of that is the other end. So this is for securing the other end of your power supply. So yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. And also there is a PCI Express bracket here. So this will go on the side and you can attach in things like graphics cards, capture cards, whatever you need to do on there. So that is for your PCI Express, and that has got 7 slots. Also included there is a very, very brief instruction manual, and it tells you what the screws are and where they go, or to some extent where they go, but we'll see that a little bit later. Also there is a power switch. So there's actually a section on here so you can have a power switch, so you don't have to keep on jump starting it with your screwdriver or a metal object. And this is a momentary switch, so it will act as a normal power button, and on the end of the cable it does say power switch, so you can connect it to your motherboard to turn the PC on or off. Also included there is a bag of screws and fixings. There's also a few cable ties, something which is quite nice to see. There is a little hex tool for putting in the motherboard standoffs, and there are 9 of the motherboard standoffs for your normal ATX layouts. Of course, if you're using a smaller board, you don't have to use all of them. That choice is entirely down to you. Also included, there are some nice chrome finished feet with rubber padding on the bottom. So if you are going to be putting this onto a flat surface, it's going to be nicely cushioned. Also quite a nice handy feature is a handle. So there's a grab handle. So if you are using it in the vertical mode, you can just use the handle on the top for moving your PC around. So I think that is pretty much for an introduction. Let's get this thing assembled and see what it's like. So the first thing we're going to install is the power supply bracket. So as you can see here, it goes with the lip towards the outside edge, and also there is the inner frame. So this is going to hold the power supply in place. You want the frame this way round, not the other way round, and the screws go in from the bottom. You see there's 2 holes there. You can see possibly I've got 1 screw in there, and 1 screw is about to go into there. And these are using the larger hex type screws, the ones that you'd normally use for putting in power supplies, graphics cards, those kinds of things. And there is a close-up of the screw, so you can see which one it actually is. As you can see, they are metal and magnetic. A magnetic screwdriver is going to be helpful here because we do have to access it from this hole. So screwdriver in. Now you can see the screw going in from the bottom and attaching the frame. So do both of those up nice and tight. For the other side of the power supply, you've got the other mounting here. So you've got options depending on the size of your power supply. You can use these screws here, or you can have this one which is sliding to adjust. So with the screws attached, you can have a little bit of movement to slide it to the size of your power supply, or you can mount it smaller if you have a smaller power supply. Again, this is using the smaller PSU and case type screws, 2 of those required. And there we go, there are the brackets in place. So power supply is going to go this side, this is where your power socket is going to go, and then your cables will be coming out of this side. Also notice that the bracket is on the inside for both of those to hold the power supply in place. Next is going to be the graphics card PCI Express rack. So as you can see, there are 3 holes in the bottom of this rack. There are also 3 holes along the bottom there. So again, taking the same screws, we're just going to put 3 screws in through the sides there. With the bracket in place, you can see there are our 3 hex type screws holding it in place, and it's actually pretty rigid as well, which is really nice. Also, if you look from the other angle, you can see the screws on the top. So you want the kind of frame or the inset actually on the outside rather than the inside. Of course, you can change all this at any point just by undoing the screws and remounting it. Next, we can install the fan bracket. And if you look at the fan bracket, you'll notice there is a indentation just here at this end, and this goes at the bottom end where your PCI Express is. So if you have it like this, and then all you need to do is line up the 3 screws with the back plate. So now we've got the fan bracket attached. As you can see, fan mounting section there, and there's the 3 screw holes. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of where it goes. Very slight gap at the bottom here, at the power supply end, and at this end it goes right to the very edge. So that's our fan bracket installed. The drive rack on the back, it's pretty straightforward, and there is a channel cut out top and bottom, and you can see there are 4 screw holes. So that just goes into place, and again we're using the same hex head screws, 4 of them in there, and there we go. There are the 4 screws attached to the drive rack. Next we're going to install the feet at the bottom, and these are using the half round coarse thread screws. There are 4 locations for the feet, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. Take your half round screw and stick it through the foot and screw into position. With the feet screwed into place, it should start looking a little something like this. Don't over screw these because the screws are metal but the feet are plastic, so potentially if you over tighten them they may crack or shatter. So just get them so they're snug. At this point now, the instructions kind of leave us a little bit wanting, and what we need to do is to install our power switch. So you just grab the cable, route it through this rectangular hole at the top, and just pull it all the way through. It will snap into place, so decide which way you want it around. If you want it with the dot on that side or that side, the choice is going to be up to you. Just decide which way you want it and push that in. Might need a little squeeze, and there we go, that's snapped into place. So now we have our nice working clicky power button. Next we're going to install the 9 motherboard standoffs. So there's our standoffs, and we can use our little tool to help get them started. So we've got 1 there, 1 there, 1 at the bottom, another 1 there, another 1 there, another 1 there, 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 and there. Obviously, depending on the motherboard that you're deciding to install in your computer, then some of these may not be necessary. Get your motherboard, place it on the deck, and that'll give you an idea of where it needs to go. Obviously, if you're using ITX or micro ATX, the pinouts will be different, but they're relatively clearly marked. And there we go, there are our 9 motherboard standoffs installed in the ATX format. So this basically, if you're going to be thinking of eATX, yeah, it's basically not going to happen because you're going to be right up against the fan bracket. Although if you don't use the fan bracket, you should be okay. So now we can install the handle. Now the handle comes with 2 long screws included, but you actually want to use the other ones that are inside the other bag. So use the smaller screws. They're unique. There's only 2 of those in the packaging. And to install the handle, goes into this top section here. So put one of your screws through this one and the other through that hole there, and then you can attach the handle. And there we go. There is our completed open air test bed frame. Actually quite easy to install. So yeah, pretty happy with that. So obviously at the back side, we've got our connectivity for the power supply, PCI Express. We've got the handle on the top. So if you are actually mounting it like a PC, you can have it in the inverted style. So power supply on the bottom, motherboard here, graphics cards, etc. at the top, which might make it a little bit top heavy, but I don't think it's going to wobble around too much. So I think that should be absolutely fine. And of course, on this front side, you've got the power button, which I've routed through down to the bottom here, where the motherboard connectivity is going to be. There are some included cable ties, so you can cable manage that how you wish to. But I think that's pretty much done. So the next thing to do, I think, is to put some components on here and see what it's actually like. Okay, so the final build is done, and I think it's turned out quite nice. There are some pros and cons, which we'll talk about as we go through this. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what I was actually expecting. Normally with the kind of the open form factor chassis, there are generally some compromises to be made. And normally the bigger they are, the less the compromises, which I think is where this kind of fits in that middle ground. So some of the really small ones I think are just a bit pointless, to be honest with you, and a little bit too challenging for a lot of people, unless you're looking at some ultra expensive ITX build. But when it comes to ATX, generally these tend to be a little bit bigger. And I think having a slightly more compact size actually makes it a little bit nicer. But I think it more tends to make this somewhat of a design PC or a statement PC rather than being an all-out test bench. And I'll tell you why that is. The fan mounts on the side, as good as they are and handy as they are, even with a graphics card which isn't particularly big, so this is the Radeon RX 7800 XT, and it basically comes up to pretty much the edge there. And you've probably seen this from some other shots and different angles, but you can see the graphics card is basically the width of the motherboard. And if we go over and above that, we spin this round, you can see it would go past it, but it just means you wouldn't be able to have a fan there or a radiator, that sort of thing. So there are going to be some compromises to be made here, whether or not you want to have a radiator and fans on the side, or whether you want to literally be an open air test bench like it is now. Ultimately it's going to be down to the individual, but certainly if you're looking for doing this and you're looking at using a AIO of some sort on the sides there, it is going to make your graphics card choice a little bit more difficult. Now if you're going with a graphics card which can use a water cooler and you're able to put a jacket on it, it's going to be considerably smaller, so that is going to throw up other options, but then you're in the realms of custom open loop water cooling on an open test bench is probably not ideal. So that I think really is the only downside. There are some other things which I noticed. Now, as you can probably tell, this is the inverted layout, so power supply is on the bottom. We've got the I/O for the motherboard here, graphics card here, fans down, so for some people they might not like that. I don't think it's actually too bad in this particular format. You can, if you want to, can actually remove the handle from the top, and there are screw holes on the other end down here. So you could put the handle there, and then you'd be left with, let's see if I can actually do this, and then you'd be left with something a little bit like this. Now you're going to be putting a lot of weight over on this corner because there's no supports there. You have a support there from the PCI Express section. Obviously the handle won't be there, so it'll meet up with the floor. But would you want all of your delicate pins at the bottom here resting on the floor? I don't think you would. So potentially with a little bit of coaxing and a little bit of metalwork possibly, or a little bit of modification, you could actually rise this up a little bit, make some plastic spacers or something just to rise it up. But it is a little bit on the top heavy side because of the power supply. Now again, depending on the graphics card you use, then you could kind of flip-flop that anyway. So that is my only kind of real thoughts on it. If someone's asking, can you do it the other way around? I'd say probably SFX power supply on the top to keep the weight down, and something on the bottom to level it out, and I think that would be absolutely fine. So let's take a look at it in its kind of more traditional layout. So this is kind of how it's really meant to be for in terms of a test bench. So you've got the power switch on the side there, which is excellent. Cabling as well, I've tidied that up there. It's relatively easy to cable manage, to be honest with you. If you're using it as a test bench, you probably won't worry about cable management, but I wanted this to be multi-function, so a test bench and also something which looks kind of pretty as well. Again, you could have put the fans there, radiators. They do show on the website up to a 360mm AIO. Again, depending on the weight, etc., you may want to just look at the options. A 240 would be absolutely fine. 360 might be pushing it a little bit. Fans would be absolutely fine, no problem at all. It's quite nice steel on there, or whatever the metal is very strong. Moving around to the side there, so yeah, power supply end, that is essentially the bottom section. Moving around to the other side, you can see you've got access to all of your components, your power supply inlet, all of your I/O for your motherboard, obviously I/O for the graphics card, and if you've got other peripheral cards, they will fit in there quite nicely as well. And it's all actually really sturdy and strong. I'm very pleased with that. That works out really well. The handle on the top, again, very sturdy, very strong, so that works very well. And on the back, if we lift it up, you can see we've actually got some hard drives in there as well, which I wasn't thinking I was going to put in, but we've got all the SATA cables, we've got all of our other cables from the power supply as well tucked in here, so if we ever want to use them, got them here handy. So that is basically like a storage pocket, so that's kind of handy. So if you've got a modular power supply and you want to keep your power supply cable somewhere, that's okay. There's some pass-throughs. I put the SATA cables through here and that kind of stuff, so yeah, it's worked out quite nicely. 3.5-inch drive there. You can put another 3.5-inch there, there is enough room, or you can do 2.5s. The choice is going to be entirely up to you. And there's other little places down here, tie down points all along here, so if you want to do some cable management and route cables elsewhere to keep it looking tidy, then you can do with very few problems. Spinning it around and moving it around with that handle, again, is very easy to do. So I think that is pretty much it from my point of view. I'll be interested to hear what your thoughts are about this one in the comment section below. It's actually better than I thought it was, but there are some limitations. So it isn't going to be an all-out test bench, I don't think, because of the slight limitation of width there, and actually mounting water cooling hardware might be slightly challenging. But if you're someone like me, you do lots of BIOS flashing and possibly you do YouTube stuff, tutorials, whatever, and you want something to actually put your motherboard on rather than just resting it on a box, or you're just into tinkering around with PCs and you've got a motherboard somewhere and you're thinking, what can I do with that? I want to do something a bit different, a bit interesting. So for around about 30 to 40 quid, depending on the postage rates, I think it's actually well worth a shout. And the things such as like the built-in power button, which has been done really nicely, I think this works out very well. And it actually looks quite pretty as well, I think, personally. But again, let me know what you think about this one in the comments section below. Thanks once again to Aurali and Uglybob for sending this over to us. Much appreciated. I think that's going to wrap this one up. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To. And hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.